How did you get into voice acting in the first place? And what was your career path to where you are today?
I entered the voiceover industry when I left drama school. It was the first job I had was in the voice world. I won a competition called the Carlton Hobbs competition, and the prize for that was a contract with the BBC Radio Drama Company. So my first job out of drama school was working for the BBC Radio Drama Company, and I did a load of radio plays and serials and comedies and stuff while I was there. And also after I left, I kept going back and doing various bits and pieces for them and for other audio drama companies and serials. So companies like Big Finish, who do the Doctor Who range. So I started off in dramas, and I still do dramas now for Big Finish, BBC, for Audible as well. And I first got into gaming here at OMUK. I think 2014 or 2015 was my first game here, and I've got over 40 games in my credits now. So I've been doing games for quite a long time. Also do audiobooks and commercials when they'll let me. Not very often, but yeah. So my path has been long and varied, and yeah, I'm still really grateful to be working in audio 25 years later.
Are there any major differences in preparation, execution, sort of practical working conditions to working on games than there is in other voiceover work?
As far as preparation for roles is concerned, video game work doesn't differ from other work I do very much, really. I don't do an awful lot of preparation for much of the stuff that I do. The thing that takes the most preparation is an audio book, because you're generally reading straight through all of the narration into the dialogue and stuff, and you've got to keep flow going for as long as possible, 6 or 7 hours a day. Leaping from character to character, so you've got to know who's speaking when. And so when I do an audio book, I tend to go through it before I do the book and just mark up in the margin who's speaking and just different changes if I need to. So audio books are the thing I do the most prep on. Dramas I do very little prep on, the same as games really. I've done so many now. I'm just so used to going into the studio and just seeing what happens with the lines. I can kind of read through them quickly and understand what's going on with a bit of direction, and then leap straight into the characters. So I don't do much prep on video games, and I don't do much prep on anything else other than audio books. So there's not a great deal of difference. It's kind of sight reading. Often I've never seen the lines before. But it's also kind of not sight reading because I'm already scanning through the lines and making sure I can read them while we're discussing the character and while we're going ahead. The only thing that would take more prep is in games or in anything is if you had a larger character, lots of narration or some deeply dramatic monologues that you needed to work on. They might do with a bit more preparation beforehand, but again, if you've been doing it long enough, you can kind of find it on at least a second go through. So, it doesn't differ much in gaming to anything other than audio books for me.
Is it more difficult to understand and sort of inhabit the character you're going to be doing the voice work for in a game than it would be in a bit of film work or perhaps audiobook, for example?
The most difficult aspect of recording this particular video game was, and it was great fun as well, it was so difficult and fun, so I'm not complaining about this, was that I was cast originally as this character called Murnau, which I believe we'll speak briefly about in a minute, a brilliant character. But when I first came in for the first few sessions of recordings, there wasn't a lot of Murnau's dialogue ready. And I'm a multi-voice actor, so I play lots of different characters. I can do lots of accents and lots of different voices. So they kept throwing loads and loads of different characters at me. And so the most difficult aspect on this was remembering what voices I'd done before. If I'd played a soldier and then suddenly I'm playing like a mercenary, obviously they've got to sound different, so I was just trying to remember what accents I'd already used and where I'd placed my voice and those kinds of things from months ago. And actually that's the most difficult thing I think probably in gaming in general is sometimes these characters can take a year or two from start to finish to complete, and I might only come in for an hour or two every few months or every few weeks or here and there. So it's maintaining that character's voice and energy in sort of sporadic pieces, sporadic bits all the way through, coming back and remembering exactly how it sounded, because otherwise when the game's put together, the character's just talking linearly, but I might have recorded that dialogue 2 years apart, and if he sounds like this one day and then the next time he speaks he's slightly different, and then he goes back to if the character does vary too much or whatever. So yeah, I think both in this game and generally it's making sure that I've kept the characters as different as possible, and that I've separated the accents and the energies out for each of the characters, and they don't sound too similar, and that then I keep that character the same throughout the whole time that I record those characters. Luckily, of course, they've got voice references on records that I've done previously that they play, so you can match them and find that character voice again fairly easily. But yeah, that for me would be the most difficult aspect, but also the most fun aspect. I love coming in and them going, right, now you're playing this old priest, now you're playing this soldier, now you're playing this, whatever. That's what I do. I play with my voice. And doing Songs of Silence has been just such great play. All the characters have been really good fun, and the dialogue's been great, and the director has just been brilliant to play with, and it's just been, yes, difficult but fun. So I'm not complaining. So Murnau, what can I tell you about Murnau? He's kind of just he's kind of evil, I guess, but he's also, he's been through a lot. He was a soldier, and he was traumatized a long time ago, and he's become this kind of thing, that he didn't want to become. There's moments where you see his weaknesses and things like that, and I always try and empathise with all of the characters that I play, even if they're even if they're the darkest and nastiest of characters. And I've played some really horrific characters in various things in my career, and I always have to find the reason why they're being so dark or evil. And it doesn't necessarily mean I have to make the character empathetic. You don't have to empathise with it, but I do. I have to know what that character's been through, just in my own mind. Just kind of feel that in order to be that dark and evil, they must have been through something themselves, and so yeah, it was really interesting to try and find that in Murnau. And the voice was really interesting to find as well for him. When I auditioned for it, I gave 3 different versions. They sent me a voice reference, which they often do when they send castings out, which is something that they sort of have in mind for the voice that I could have a look at, usually another actor doing the character from a film or from a game on YouTube or something. So they sent me through a voice reference, and originally he was just this kind of deep, bassy kind of voice, but he sounded quite human. And I liked that, and I sent that in as a sample, and then I sent one through that was a little bit more kind of darker and edgier. And I had the 3rd version, which is the end result for Murnau. We all decided that it suited the dialogue better. I dropped him even more and gave him even that more kind of edge. I put the effects on my voice myself, which is the gravel. He's got a kind of, I can undulate my voice, so it kind of has this sort of Leslie Cabinet effect to it. It kind of goes round and it comes in and out. And that's before they've layered their effects on it and dropped it or whatever they're going to do to it, So yeah, I just had that kind of thing in mind. He grumbled, he's not quite human. He's an inhuman character in a way. He's inhumane, certainly. So I wanted to find that in there, and yeah, I thought with the deep bass character, it just sounded just that bit too human. So I edged it forward, and yeah, we all agreed that the kind of gravelly, edgier one was the way forward, and it was such a fun character to play. I really enjoyed it, doing the dialogue as him. Yeah, great character. A lot of those kind of stuff. The stuff that sounds like it hurts me doesn't necessarily. All of that stuff isn't very taxing. I can quite easily, for me personally, I can quite easily put the growl on. I can do the cabinet. I can split the voice so that there's 2 or 3 tones within the voice very, very easily. The stuff for me that's most, and for any actor, I guess, that's most taxing. Some actors would find that taxing in itself, just putting all that throat on it. But I mean, I often play characters that are really hard sounding. And there's often a lot of gravel, and I can do that without any real problems. The problem for me comes when those characters have to shout, because then you're projecting volume through that tightness. And as soon as you close off or do anything like that, if those characters shout, that's when you can start to potentially damage. That's when I can start to potentially damage my voice. So I just have to be very, very careful when they're talking to armies and things like that. So, often I get cast as orcs, let's say, in the Warhammer games, do you know what I mean? And, my character is the leader of an army. So he talks like that in the first place, that's his voice. But then the fewest amount of people he speaks to at any one time is like 15. So he's already projecting to 15 orcs. And then the most amount of people he's talking to is 100 orcs on a battlefield. So then I'm just shouting that voice. In that, after about 10 minutes of that, you can really start to feel it. And actually, afterwards, it's the after effects. As I'm getting older, it's taking longer to heal my voice in the days going afterwards as well. In the old days, I'd be dry for the rest of the afternoon, and then I'd wake up the next morning and my voice would be back to normal. Whereas these days, it can, if I've been shouting for an hour, it can take 2 or 3 days to come back, So we are starting to look at more safe protocol behind those shouting sessions as voice artists, and taking longer breaks, keeping the sessions shorter so that we're not shouting for an hour, well, more than an hour, because that, long-term damage can, it's my voice, is my job. And if I break it, then we're in trouble, aren't we, So... yeah, I like those kind of characters, but they can really get exhausting. But as I said, those kind of things, they don't hurt, don't do anything to me at all, really. It's just the shouting.
Do you have sessions with other cast members reading through the scripts, or is this all sort of recorded solo in the booth?
95% of the time, I would say I record on my own in the studio. They sometimes, if they've recorded the other characters' lines already, they'll sometimes play them to me, so that I've got something to bounce back off of, and react to emotionally. Not that I necessarily need that; I can do that from my mind, but it is helpful to hear. Particularly, it's helpful to hear the other characters, so you can get your voice volume the same and the sort of tone the same. Are you having a conversation with them, or are you kind of talking to them over a table, or are you pitching to them across a room? And you often get that from the director, or from you nearly always get that note how you're speaking anyway. Although sometimes they don't know, it depends on the setting. So it is, if they've got those lines recorded from the other characters already, they'll play them in, and that's really handy. Otherwise, often the director or somebody will read them in as a cue, and that can be helpful or unhelpful depending on how good they are at reading or acting. Sometimes it just gets in the way, and I'd rather just hear it in my head, And then occasionally, once in a blue moon, you do get to act with the other actors. I've had a couple of sessions on a few games where they've called us both in at the same time. Actually, the sessions I think, on games, the only sessions I've ever done with another actor have all been on the same game, I think, which is for Blizzard. It's a Dragonflight World of Warcraft game, and they're in LA. And I record in London, so I go into a studio in the evenings and phone it in. They're in the morning in LA and directing, listening on the other end. And occasionally for the cut scenes on there, they'll have the actor that I'm working with reading in with me live, and we'll play off of each other live. That's happened for a few of those cut scenes, but if memory serves, I think that's the only game I've ever worked with another actor. If not, it happens very, very little. 95+% of the time, it's just me in a studio recording on my own.
Do you tend to watch or otherwise kind of consume the stuff that you work on generally? And will you be doing that with Songs of Silence?
So I typically do try and see as much as I can of projects I've worked on. Usually from an actor's perspective, I am interested. I always say this to students of mine. I teach voice as well, and I always say this to students of mine. It's really good to listen and watch back to as much of your work as you can, because going forward, you're your own teacher, you're your own mentor, you're your own guide. So if you listen back to these games, you can hear what you did that worked. I mean, listen objectively as a director listening to somebody else, or don't listen personally and go, "Oh, I hate my voice. That sounds ridiculous." I mean, if those things occur, great. But what worked, what didn't work, how can I improve in the future? What could I change? Various things that I wouldn't know without looking at them. I don't play all of the games that I'm in. In fact, I very rarely play games that I'm in a lot, because it can take me out of the games when I hear myself. I like to get immersed in games. I'm not a huge gamer. I game occasionally. I've got a PS4. And I also go to my mate's house with another mate of mine who's a voice actor, and the three of us game together. Occasionally, he's got a PS5. So we do play bits and pieces of the games that we're in. I also, the great thing about modern technology is YouTube. You can nearly always watch cutscenes that you've done, which they just produce on YouTube now. You can watch playthroughs, people kind of sitting there talking about, as they're playing through. So there's various ways of me finding clips of what I've done throughout online. I mean, if I've got a few lines as guard one or whatever, I won't search it out, but I'll look for my main characters and see if I can find them and just watch bits and pieces of them. I might happen to be in games that we've chosen to play anyway as a sort of byline, so I'll just wear that and get on with it. It's no problem. And my favourite games, I will play the ones that look and feel the most fun out of all of them, especially if it's my kind of game. Sometimes if I don't really personally like, say, platform scrollers, for example. So if I'm in one of those, I just wouldn't play it. I'll see it or whatever. But as far as Songs of Silence goes, I will certainly play it. It looks beautiful, for one. I'm so impressed with the artwork that I've seen so far. It sounds great. It's from the bits of acting that I've had fed to me and bits and pieces, it's sounding fantastic, and all of the visuals and the music and everything that I've seen of it, it just looks like a really fabulous, beautiful game. I love the fantasy kind of gentle idea of it as well. I used to really like the kind of war games and fighting, but the darker the world's got out there now, the less I want to play those kind of games. The more I want to get a sort of gentle fantasy reality, a gentle fantasy holiday away from reality. So this is certainly the sort of game that I would play. And on top of all of that, there's a load of my mates in it, and I'm going to be listening through, just celebrating all my friends' performances and going, "Oh, brilliant, there's so-and-so, and oh, there they are doing this character." I know Ash Haddad, well, for example, who's playing Lorelei, and I've just heard my mates being fed into me in the studio, or I've caught their names on the call sheet, and I'm like, "Oh, this is going to be and that actually is sort of bookends the beginning of my career. Me and the friend I was just talking about who game together, I remember 25 years ago us sitting down playing the original Broken Sword game, and as we were playing through, we were just recognising all of our new friends from the BBC who were in that game as all the characters. Oh, that's Gavin Muir. Oh, that's Steve Hodgson. Oh, that's Rachel Atkins. That's David Holt. And we were just so excited that our friends were in this game. And now, cut to 25 years later, and we're sitting gaming, and I say, "Was that you?" He's like, "Yeah, that was me." "Is that you?" "Oh, yeah, I'm in this as well." "Yeah, I forgot." It's just kind of come full circle, and so yeah, I'm just really proud to still be in this industry. I love it so much, and to still be invited to work on such amazing games as this one. It was great fun to do, and I'm sure it will be equally great fun to play. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it.